that on there. Okay. So this is a graph that I like to show people to really illustrate how dramatic of a difference the time period we live in is when we contrast it with the rest of economic history. Okay, so you can see that there's this kind of flat line and this is going this way is time, and going this way is the amount of money that people live on. Okay, so what you're seeing here is this is about $3. That throughout human history, most people have lived on $3 a day or less. And that isn't $3 a day in cash. That is the equivalent of $3 a day going to all needed and wanted resources. So if you think of your basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, at just the basic level, imagine $3 a day to cover all of those expenses. Now, this is not in cash, but just the equivalent of it. And most people throughout all human history lived in extreme poverty at near starvation level. Most people were trying to get enough calories to survive. And a lot of them didn't, because people were desperately poor. Now, there are some wealthy people in history. Okay, go around here to 1500. There could be like a medieval king, some sort of royal, who is living better than $3 a day. That being said, that's the exception. That's only a couple people throughout human history. But if you think about it in terms of today, who's wealthier? The average American or a medieval king? And medieval king, may have servants or, certain things that we may look at in stories and movies and things like that and see, wow, that person, they have a castle, right? That being said, that individual with a castle, a medieval royal, did not have electricity, did not have modern plumbing, did not have refrigeration, did not have the internet. I mean, they did not have cars, did not have gasoline, all these things that we think of today as being normal, at one point either did not exist, or if they did exist, were considered things that only the wealthy could possess. If we want to even go back before AD, go back into 900s BC, think of like one of the wealthiest kings in history, King Solomon. Okay, tons of trade, animals from all over the world, tons of servants, tons of gold and silver and all sorts of things being brought in from all over the world at that time. Political alliances with all kinds of nations. And it was said during his time in his reign that silver became as common as stones because they had so much silver brought into his kingdom. And one of the legend, I don't know if it's, I have reason to believe it's true, but I also, there's some limits on this. One of the legends that has risen about this is that one of the descriptors of his wealth was that Solomon was so wealthy that he could have ice, snow imported from mountains to be ice for his drinks. Now, that was a sign of extravagant wealth, 900 BC. But today, ice is fairly normal, inexpensive, and accessible, right? So who is really wealthier? The wealthiest person in maybe the world at that time compared to an average person today, things have that were once for the wealthy have become normal in a lot of senses. And we don't think of them as items of the super rich. So today in the United States, people live on the equivalent of about $130 a day, which is not in cash, but again, this is of what we experience, the wealth that we participate in. So you see this graph going from $3, $3, $3, nothing really changes, and all of a sudden shoots way up here, and this is where we live. It's even higher than this actually, but this is where we live, and there's every indication that it's going to continue increasing vertically. And so we're at a time in history that is unique over the last 200 years, really. The beginning of this takes place around the Industrial Revolution, around 1800. But the question is, what explains this? And there's also good news. It's not just the United States. Global poverty over the last 50 years, people living on less than $3 a day, that's been halved. That's been cut in half. Global poverty is being rapidly eradicated. Doesn't mean we don't have problems. That doesn't mean that other people in the world don't have problems, or that you wouldn't notice a dramatic difference if you went other places in the world outside the United States and experienced kind of what people go through. But people living on that small amount is going away because people are getting rapidly wealthier. And so what explains this? Well, one economist looked at it and said, okay, well, there's a couple explanations that don't work. And one explanation is that, well, it was from things like exploitation, imperialism, which is like taking things from other countries or forcing things from other countries through war and stuff like that, and slavery and those type of things. That's what brought about the wealth of, places like the United States or the West or whatever the case may be. There are elements of truth to that. There was exploitation, there was slavery, there was imperialism, that these things have been the norm of human history. Unfortunately, they're ethical injustices. However, they've been normal. Slavery's been normal. Imperialism, war, these terrible things have been normal for all of human history. What's not normal is this growth of wealth. So the problem with that explanation is that exploitation leads to wealth, that we're wealthy because others are poor around the world or throughout history, or that type of thing, doesn't totally work, because there's always been exploitation, but it has not always led to wealth. I mean, it's led to some wealth, but it has its limits. Okay, so there's some truth to that, but it doesn't fully explain it. The other side is that, okay, well, if you just keep investing in certain things, that will bring about wealth. And the problem with that is, if you just keep layering, okay, investment with no innovation, then there's always been investment of some level, but it didn't create wealth either. So the change arguably is from new ideas that started coming about during this time and a little earlier. Of one was economic freedom, that people had the ability to interact voluntarily and trade with one another and ideas and benefit from that trade. So having the economic freedom or liberty to do that, people can interact, make decisions, and then in trade, the reason why trade can exist is the people participating in it both feel like they are getting the better end of the deal, which we'll talk about later. But when you go and you pay money for something, the person wants the money more than they want the thing, and you want the thing more than you want the money, and you both leave feeling like you have gotten a net benefit from that interaction. And economic freedom is also allowed for people to interact and benefit from the knowledge and skills of others, which is down here called a division of labor. A division of labor is hugely important because it allows people to specialize and get into just, instead of doing everything, do just a few pieces of an overall job, okay, which we'll talk about more another time. But one of the weaknesses that we have as human beings is ignorance. We don't know everything about everything that's going on in the world in real time. And the example I've been giving of the importance of division of labor in regard to our ignorance is the dentist. If I didn't know and couldn't freely interact with the dentist and benefit from someone else's knowledge and expertise in the field of dentistry, then that means I have to be my own dentist. That means I have to develop the resources, the time, the tools, the energy, the knowledge set, and the skill to be my own dentist. Thankfully, I don't have to have that knowledge or a mechanic or those other things, that people can specialize in just doing those things and then interact with each other. And then also, along with that, there came social honor for the regular people doing regular jobs. That there was a higher appreciation, which took a couple hundred years to develop, for just the normal people who were doing a job well and being trustworthy and those type of things in your job, in your skill, in your trade. That started to take on an honor of its own, that it wasn't just the high elites, the political elites, the people in the clergy, the people in the church. It was that the average person doing something well was just as good as someone doing something that was traditionally seen as more important work. Right? So somebody making shoes, if they do that well, is to be respected, to be honored for doing that. But it wasn't always that way throughout human history. So there had to be changes in thinking. Now, what generates this wealth and why at this time? Well, that comes from, it's called capital investment. Capital investment, there are these goods called capital goods and there are goods called consumer goods. Capital goods are goods that you invest in to help you do something else. They're tools that you invest in to help you accomplish another task. Consumer goods are things you buy to use or consume. Like if I buy a block of cheese, I use the cheese to eat. Okay, it's to be consumed. If I buy a lawnmower, the lawnmower is helping me do something else, mow the lawn. Okay, it's a tool. Okay, tools are another way to think of capital investment. And if you invest in tools, you're having to give up something. You're having to give up time, money, energy, and resources, and you're going to have to save and invest and take a risk in investing in a tool. But that tool can then hopefully make you more productive and more efficient in what you want to accomplish, like digging a trench with a shovel as opposed to with your hands. You may want to take the time to invest and figure out how to make a shovel rather than continuing to try to dig with your hands, because the time that you spend making the shovel will be made up by the benefit of having a shovel. That creates productivity, which causes growth. So the core of what grows an economy is what we're going to look at today: savings. Savings invested in tools and machines made humans more productive and increased wealth. Now, some people disagree with this, but I think that there is the core truth in economics that is true logically. And it's this: that economics takes place as human beings in space and time. We have to interact with both of those realities, space and time. Savings is foregoing consuming in the present so that you can have more in the future. Spending or consuming is consuming more now in the present, and the assumption is that you will have less in the future. So saving, by definition, starts to grow an economy, starts to grow wealth, because if you spend $1, you don't have that dollar anymore. If you save it, the next day you have X amount of whatever you have plus $1. So you've already seen growth, right? And again, economics doesn't tell you how much you should save, if you should save or consume. It doesn't say those things. It just says people will save for different reasons or not for different reasons based on their subjective value. But saving is what grows an economy. The other side is when people think that well, no, stimulus through spending grows an economy, meaning that if you try to stimulate people to go out there and spend, that will create growth. And that is true. It has elements of truth in it. It will create growth temporarily and in aspects of the economy as money is spent through it. That being said, it has in it a fundamental flaw. And the fundamental flaw is this: that the money that gets spent, if spending causes growth, imagine having very little or close to nothing, like the $3 a day. If spending caused growth, shouldn't those people just spend a lot more money? The $3 a day, shouldn't they have just spent a bunch more, and that would have caused growth? And I think you can see that spending ultimately leads to spending into nothingness if pushed to its logical extreme, which is not growth, but it's actually loss. It's negative growth. So that kind of is an explanation of this graph of why this time period that we have is economically so wealthy and so unique. Let me go ahead and stop sharing there.